All right, everyone. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything session with the world famous Michael Bolton, and it's great to have you in these big numbers here tonight. And I'm Jani Grönman, your host tonight. I'm from Hidden Trail, and this session is also related to our rapid software testing export course we are hosting with Michael in this April later this year, and links to the course are somewhere down in the description, I hope. And yeah, I think that's all. And all right, let's turn to our guest Michael. Welcome, Michael. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Although I'm here, not there. I'm looking forward to being there.
Yeah. When was the last time you were in Finland?
I don't rightly know. It's been a while. I think it was 2011 or 2012 or something like that. It's been a long time.
Okay. Yeah. It's great to have you.
I hear the airport's still open.
Yeah, I think it is.
It's a joke amongst airport geeks. The airport in Helsinki closed for 15 minutes at one point in the 1970s or something like that, and it's been open continuously ever since. The indomitable spirit of the Finns there.
Yeah, we are proud of our promises and keeping those. Yeah. All right. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Oh, gee, is that even interesting? I guess I could spend a moment to say that I've been involved in testing for what is coming on 35 years now, one way or the other, as a programmer. Initially, a program manager at Quarterdeck for several years, a teacher of testing, and a designer and a co-author of the Rapid Software Testing course with my colleague James Bach, who is the creator of it. And I guess over the last 20 years, especially since I first started getting involved with RST, I've done over 1 million miles in those aforementioned airports. Talk about testing and helping people to get straight on what is, alas, a lot of confusion and a lot of turbulence around the field of testing, which has played out in various ways over the years. That's my job. I think about testing stuff and talk about it, and hope I can inspire other people to think about it and talk about it in similar kinds of ways.
Yeah, that's at least from the personal perspective, that's what you have done, and you have been like the person to listen to and have been like an inspiration many times. About the RST export course, what is RST and to whom it is targeted?
Rapid software testing is an approach to testing, a context-driven approach to testing that is focused on the skill set and the mindset of the tester to do the fastest, least expensive testing we can do, given the time constraints and given the lack of sufficient information that we're sometimes working under, while still providing excellent results, which for me amounts to keeping the people that matter informed about the actual status of the product, not our wishes and hopes and dreams for it, but how it actually behaves through experiencing, exploring, and experimenting with the product. Now, there's a lot to unpack in the notion of rapid software testing, but one thing to point out is it's not always about fast testing as much as it is about fast learning. We want to get results quickly, but sometimes when risk is high, we want to take a little more time and examine the product deeply. Now, part of our goal in RST, what we aspire to, is to make shallow testing deeper and to make deep testing cheaper, faster and less expensive. Yeah, we've developed our way of talking about that over the years. But the goal of testing is not to demonstrate that the product works, but to find out about how the product actually works, and that with a special focus on finding problems that matter, so that the people who are responsible for designing and building and managing the product can make informed decisions about how to address the problems that are in the product. Some of them they'll ignore. Some of them they will pay very serious attention to and fix them. Some of them they'll develop ways of working around it. But we believe that learning the product and knowing the product and exercising the product in various ways that reflect actual use of the product, in addition to probing it with tools. We believe that all of those things are on the table because we want to discover what the product actually is, what it does, how it works, how it doesn't work, how it fails, how it might fail in ways that matter to our clients and to their customers.
Yeah, so it's really a comprehensive way of like learning about the qualities of a product or quality of a product.
Yeah, we want to learn about the quality of the product. And one of the things that's come up over the last a couple of years in our discourse is our goal is not to improve quality. That testers don't do that any more than diagnosticians improve health. What we try to do is shine light on quality so that the people who do improve quality, the people who are responsible for building the product and designing it and managing it and so forth, so that those people can take the steps they need to take in order to improve quality. So we help with that process, but we don't do it. Another metaphor that keeps coming up is that, I've thanks to a diabetes diagnosis about a year ago, I decided I needed to lose some weight. So I weigh myself fairly assiduously every day. But weighing myself doesn't make me healthier. Blood tests don't make the patient better. Yeah. What they do is they help us to establish the status of the patient. They help us to establish, what factors we might choose to pay attention to in order to make certain kinds of improvements, or to decide that things are okay and that we can soldier on as we do.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of like paths or trails from that to any direction, but let's start to take questions from the viewers and folks out there. Remember that write your questions in the YouTube streams chat window, and I'll hopefully catch them here also, so we can.
Yeah, I can't see them. That's oh well.
Yeah. So, do we have questions up? All right, we can start with a pretty big one that we already. All right, we have one here. Great. Why is it important to make your testing visible? What value does doing so bring to the project?
It is, I think, important for testers to identify their role and their commitment and to make that clear. Let's start with that. The commitment that I make is not to improve quality. That's in the hands of the people who are responsible for building the product and making decisions about it. My commitment is to help people understand the nature of the product, to shine light on it. And in that sense, it's all about visibility. It's all about spotting things that people have not hitherto noticed. It's about making the results of our testing, the outcome of our testing, visible and legible. Legible is a really important word for us. Readable, understandable to the clients of testing. That includes three interwoven, but different things. Number one, which I've mentioned, is a story about the status of the product. That's what's most important to our clients, I think. How's the product doing? Now, if there's any controversy about the status of the product, there's something else that we have to be able to tell, which is a story about how we've tested, how we've interacted with the product, how we configured it, how we set it up, how we operated it, how we observed it, how we evaluated it, and how we came to an inference, a suspicion that this thing that we're looking at, this behavior in the product or this aspect of its state represents a problem somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And not only what we've done, but what we haven't done yet or what we won't be able to do at all. And that's really important because the testing that we haven't done yet is where risk might still be lurking.
Mm.
So it's very important for us to outline to our clients not just what we know about the product, but if you like, the reliability of that knowledge, how dependable that knowledge is. And that knowledge is based on what we've done, what we've covered so far, what we haven't covered yet, and what we won't cover at all unless things change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's got to be visible. But there's one more thing that shores up that second story, the story of how we tested. And that is the story of the quality of our testing, how good the testing was, why the testing we did was the most fabulous testing imaginable, or to the degree it wasn't, why it wasn't, what got in our way, what made things harder, what made our testing less valuable and less relevant. Because sometimes we can sort those things out and address them ourselves, but sometimes we need help from management, from our clients, from the developers, in order to make, once again, in order to make our shallow testing deeper and to make our deep testing cheaper. So if those things aren't visible or if they're hidden, there's room for all kinds of mischief. And one of the things that I think happens a lot in, for example, projects where we're trying to apply tools, low code or no code tools in order to demonstrate what's going on with the product. It seems to me that in a lot of cases, that's going to leave a lot of stuff uncovered about the actual behavior of the product, other than the simple demonstrations that we've set up with those no code tools. That makes our testing less relevant and less valuable. And amounts to basically fairly shallow and fairly simple kinds of observations and that we could make about the behaviors and the states of the product. we've got to be able to talk about that and to make that visible, to emphasize that the important stuff is not what happens on the computer with the machinery, but it's what happens in our heads, in our evaluation of the product. And that's something that I fear testers aren't really that great at. Because, if you have difficulty with a low code or a no code kind of tool, that is in some sense embarrassing, or it's going to be challenged because, the vendors say, oh, this thing's easy. We set it up to be easy so that anyone can do it. Well, when management doesn't have visibility into the difficulties you're having with that, then management is going to assume that everything's going okay. So we've got to be really, really careful about, I think, about being clear on what's taking time, what's making things harder, what's making things slower, because that constrains the quality of the testing work that we're able to do.
Yeah, there's a saying in Finland that do you want to do it quickly or with your computer?
Well, lots of things that we can do with computers can be done really, really quickly, like committing huge numbers of errors at scale, right?
For example, yeah.
Computers are very agnostic about whether things are getting better or worse. I've said this before, if we're wonderful testers, then computers can help accelerate and intensify and enable and enhance and extend the wonderfulness of our testing. But if we're not very good testers, then machinery can help us do bad testing faster and worse than we've ever done it before. And the machinery doesn't know and doesn't care about that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really crucial to keep in mind that same applies to testing as it does to production code. If there's a problem in what we're doing, machinery amplifies the problem. It doesn't necessarily make everything good. So I like that expression. The thing about technology, any kind of technology, whether it from the most sophisticated instruments that we use to explore other planets with, right down to language and writing. Writing is a technology. Writing accelerates and enhances and intensifies and enables and extends the capacity for us to communicate with each other. But writing doesn't make our thoughts good. Mm-hmm. And instrumenting our exploration of something is wonderful if we are exploring in appropriate and useful ways that aren't harmful. There's a risk associated with the stuff that we're sending up to Mars and to the moon and so on, that especially Mars, that what we're sending could contaminate the surface. Well, the technology enables that too. So it's important for us as testers, because we're the only ones on the project whose primary focus is trouble. It's important for us to keep trouble at the forefront of what we're doing, to preserve our faith in trouble, to preserve our faith in problems. And that means being self-critical. It means being reflective about the quality of our own work and identifying all the threats to validity that are a hallmark of good qualitative research of any kind in the sciences. Testing is science in that respect.
Mm. All right. There's another question referring to what you said about the role of testers. I agree that the act of testing doesn't improve quality in itself, but don't we as testers have a responsibility to try to influence those decisions? Or should
No, I used to think that, and I'm much more jaundiced about that now. Look, on one level, creating a quality product, that's a goal everybody shares. I share that too. I don't want to, I don't want to be a member of a team that's going to be producing crap. I'm just like anybody else that way. But as soon as I start to think, how can I improve the product? I'm no longer an instrument that extends the eyesight and the hearing and the fingertips of the team in terms of finding trouble. I'm now shifting into a builder role when I do that. Now, of course, I can have an opinion. I'm a human being. I can have an opinion about something and I can make suggestions to the designers and so on and so forth. But I've got to be really conscious of the fact that when I do that, I'm suddenly taking off my testing hat and putting on a builder's hat.
Great props.
Well, I am a trained professional here. But as a it's a little bit like, I've used this metaphor recently in the conversation on LinkedIn. It's a little bit like being the goalie on a football team. My job is, in a way, to be the person responsible for tending the goal, where the goal is the possibility of, instead of a football, of a problem to get past us without us noticing, right? The opposing team, which is not any other group of people or anything like that, the opposition when we're in a software development project is the dynamics of software development itself, right? The idea that there's trouble and trouble can get past us. Now, thank heavens for the team in front of us, because it's the team's job to make sure that the ball doesn't get anywhere near the goal. But if I am the goalie, a person responsible for making sure that problems don't get past us without us knowing about it, whenever I run downfield and try to score a goal, I'm abandoning the goal. I'm abandoning the goal crease. And while I do that, I should be well aware, as the goalie, I probably don't have the skills that a striker has. I probably don't have the skills that a midfielder has, or that a backfielder has. I've got a certain kind of special skills, and I've got the advantage of being able to use my hands. But as the goalie, when I abandon the goal crease, the goal is left untended to some degree. And the people who are tending the goal don't have the skills of the goalie, and they can't use their hands. So I want to focus my work on trouble, because nobody else on the project is thinking about that other than my fellow testers. Nobody has that as their primary thing. So it's okay to make suggestions, but it's also okay for the person in the mailroom to make suggestions. There's no rule against the goalie going downfield and trying to score a goal. No rule against it. But it is important to notice the... I don't want to make too big a deal about it, but to a certain degree, we're abdicating our role when we do that, when we try to influence. And I, having been a program manager, having been a developer, having been a tester for a long time, a documenter, there are lots of different ways in which I might see positive things that we could do with the product to make it better. But I got to be really, really cautious about that, lest I drop my focus on problems.
Yeah. All right. about planning testing, documenting testing. How do you approach test planning, test documentation in a case where a feature has been broken down into like dozens of subtasks that are implemented in a different time frame? So,
okay, test planning and test documentation. First of all, let's not mistake the two. I read yet another post the other day which said a test strategy is a document for. No, it's not. A test strategy document is a document. A test strategy is a set of ideas that guide our test design. So how do I go about test planning? The first thing I do is I try to learn the product. That's the first element in my strategy. My goal early on is not to write test cases. It's not to come out with some kind of comprehensive plan for studying the product. That's emergent. That comes, or for testing the product, I mean, performing tests on the product. That's emergent. That comes from interacting with the product, learning about it, studying it, examining it, and examining what people are saying about it. A long time ago, 2006, I was chatting with Jonathan Bach at a peer conference. It was the workshops on heuristic and exploratory techniques, I guess. And John was at the time the director of intellectual capital for a company called CoreDev, an outsourced testing company. And he said, when I first get a product in for testing, I don't start looking for bugs right away. And I was gobsmacked. How could you not do that? You're a tester. You're running a test services business. You got to start looking for bugs right away. And he says, I don't look for bugs. He said, I look for benefits. I look for benefits. Why? Well, because he says, if I concentrate on figuring out how people might get value out of the product, then I can get a much better handle on how value might be threatened. If I understand how the product is constructed, if I understand the functions that it performs, how people might use it when the rubber meets the road, the various interfaces that the product exposes, the data that the product processes, the interactions between the product and time, I can get a much better sense of where the important bugs are going to be. And I thought at the time, wham! It was like getting hit on the back of the head with an immediate injection of, oh, I'm much smarter now. Thank you, Jonathan Bach. I realized that this was a problem in the way that I approach testing. I would go in hell-bent for leather looking for bugs. And inevitably what I would find and investigate and report on would be the most shallow bugs, the bugs I encountered first, the bugs that were most easy to encounter. If you start to create test cases for your product right away on encountering it, your testing will be systematically blind to deeper problems that could be there and that you would be able to find if you knew the product better. So, how do we approach test planning? First element in the plan is to learn the product, to study the product, to study its users. Ideally, to do something that a neighbor of yours in Finland did, a fellow named Oliver Wilson. Oliver in 2008, we met at a Eurostar. And he told me about this amazing thing that his bosses had done. I don't know what the number is in Finland for emergency services, 211 or 111 or something like that.
112.
112. There you go. the company that Oliver was working for made software to support 112 operators. And so they sent him to hang out with 112 operators and observe them for 2 weeks. Gave him a headset, put him on the phones with them. His headset didn't have a microphone, but he could hear what was going on, and he could observe the people doing the work and how they encountered the product and interacted with it. And I was thrilled by this story because he said that when he came back from that, his immersion in that world, his immersion in the world of people who are actually using the product, gave him so much more powerful an insight into what the product needed to do for people and how that value might be threatened. Yeah. So that's one of the elements of test strategy that I rarely see, is how are we going to understand what users actually do with that product? Because when I first showed up at the bank, there was so much I did not know about how the tellers did their work. That improved fairly dramatically when we got an actual teller on the testing team. Now, at the time, she was really green with respect to testing. She had a hard time sorting out what was important, what wasn't, how to report it, and that sort of stuff. But the advantage that she offered for me was that she was a kind of live oracle. She could provide me with lots of insight into how actual tellers work because she'd been recruited from that job. Another thing that I did quite consciously on that project, because again, it was a teller workstation application, was whenever I went into a bank, you know how when you're in a bank, you're 20 minutes in the dang lineup and you got, nothing to do while you, well, I took it upon myself to watch the tellers, to watch how they were behaving, to watch how they were interacting with the product. And one of the things I noticed was they never used the mouse. They had all these screens and keyboards, and they also had a mouse pad here. And in every case, the mouse pad was stacked with papers. And they never used the mouse because they flew around the product with the keyboard. They had basically a 102 button mouse in front of them so they could move around. And as soon as I noticed that, as soon as I saw that, I took my mouse from my desk and I put it behind my monitor so I couldn't reach it. And I started testing, and all of a sudden, all these behaviors, all these things which had been sometimes subject of these weird Flying Dutchman kind of bugs where you see it and then it kind of goes away, you don't notice it. When I focused on interacting with the product through the keyboard, all kinds of behaviors and usability issues and slowdowns and confusions and resets of the data made themselves visible to me. So these days I try to get a handle on that. What is out there in the world that allows me to learn about the users and the tasks that they're performing in some kind of real experiential kind of way. That's going to improve my experiential testing.
Yeah.
So that becomes part of test planning as well.
Yeah. So
how do I document all this? Because I'll just answer that second part of the question. A big artifact in rapid software testing approaches is the idea of a coverage outline. What is there to be covered in the product? What is there to be looked at? What factors in and about the product could we examine during a test? What factors could influence the outcome of a test? I want to catalog those and do so lots of different times at varying levels of granularity throughout the product. So if there's a new feature, I'll map out that feature in terms of some of the things I mentioned before: its structure, functions, data, interfaces, platforms, operations, how people actually use a product, and time. That's one document that I will create and maintain, one set of documents. Another is the risk list, because on a coverage outline, risk can apply to all kinds of those dimensions. So I want to keep a set of specific risks, a set of bad things that could happen to somebody. I want to try to keep those visible and legible and at the forefront of not just my work, but the client's perception of my work, so that we can talk about that and discuss how to refine it and focus it on stuff that matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. How do you feel about machine learning solutions in the realm of testing? Tools question.
Machine learning?
Yeah.
I have yet to see exactly how people are really applying machine learning really in a way that makes a whole bunch of sense. A fella, I was at a presentation a little while ago, and a fellow was describing how a tool that his company is developing applies machine learning to a suite of test cases and somehow to problems in the product or bug reports or test cases that have found failures, and selects out from that list the test cases that are most likely to find failures based on the machine learning algorithm, which is, of course, based on problems that have been found in the past,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a little weird. Here's why I think it's weird. Because a test case that has found a problem in the past, such that the problem has been fixed, is less, I would say, not more likely to find a problem in the same area. Because, you know, when you think about what programmers do, they don't exactly sit there and say, I know what I'll do. I'll fool the testers by breaking this area of the product.
Mm.
However, we do commonly hear this theme, which is we have to rerun all the test cases because we have no idea what the programmers might have broken. Really? That does not sound like a risk-based testing strategy to me. That sounds like shotgunning it, basically, just putting a whole bunch of chaff up in the air and hoping it hits something. If you find yourself hearing that or saying that, I would recommend you pause and ask, why don't we know where to focus our testing, where to focus our testing based on risk? And if it's because, well, you know, it's a big complex product, we don't know what part of the product talks to what other part of the product, my suggestion would be use tools to help you find that out.
Mm-hmm.
There's such a thing as profiling tools. I don't hear about those being used very much in these days, certainly not very much in testing. And I don't get it. There are tools that can map out the very easily the functions exported and imported by programs or by DLLs, by libraries, by frameworks, by components. Do we have a map of that? If we do, if we have a map or a diagram of that, we can focus our attention on the stuff that is likely to be affected by a change, and we can relax our focus to some degree on stuff that is not likely to be affected by a change because it's involving two components that don't talk to each other. That said, we still want to do some testing that is not focused on a risk that we're aware of. Why? Mm-hmm. Well, to help surface the unknown risks.
Yeah. Great points. All right. Yeah, just a reminder for our viewers that please do keep on adding questions to the chat box. We'll try to go through all them. Yeah, a couple of questions about like the community of testers and like how to find out about testing. So what reading tips would you recommend related to software testing if you ignore your own books?
Well, I've never actually written a full book. I've contributed to a few of them, but I've not written a whole book, so that's off the table right there. There's two different questions there, I think. One is about community, and the other is about what to read and where to read. So I'll answer that one first. So you didn't say I couldn't mention my blog, so I'm going to mention my blog, and I'll mention a James Bach's blog as well. These days, I get a sort of kickstart on some of this stuff from LinkedIn, and most of what I see written about testing is fairly dreadful, pretty bad. Most of it is done, I think, without really serious reflection on what's actually being discussed. And mostly it's about repeating folklore that's been around forever and ever. However, it's not a bad thing to read this stuff as long as you're reading it critically. And that includes my own stuff and James's stuff as well. Read it and ask yourself, does this make sense in my experience and in what other people are reporting as their experience too? There are communities of testing all over the place, and usually each community has tendrils that link to other communities. I would strongly recommend something that I've seen done lots of times, and I've actually been able to help with it sometimes too by sort of showing up as a guest. Create a local, real-world, face-to-face meetup of testers that affords the opportunity for a spontaneous interaction and conversation, serendipitous discoveries of people like yourself. The ideal is for it to be done in a convivial kind of situation where there's some food and maybe some drink of various kinds, alcoholic or not, but refreshments are a good aid to that.
Yeah.
And maybe an exercise or a game or a presentation where discussion is invited and encouraged. I think that's a great way to establish community and to kind of stir your own local pot. And then those communities will, as I say, have extensions and tendrils and stuff into other communities as well. Back to reading, there are two books that I consider pretty much essential. One is Lessons Learned in Software Testing.
The classic.
Kainer-Bach and Petticord. Yeah, it's a classic. 22, 23 years old this year and still could have been written yesterday. And then Jerry Weinberg's Perfect Software and Other Illusions About Testing, written in 2008, 15 years old now. Fresh as the day it was printed, pretty much. Pretty timeless stuff. But in addition to reading about testing, because most books about testing are pretty awful, let's face it. Most of them are. Everyone has the occasional nugget, but most of them are like a a diamond mine that you just dug in your backyard. Not likely that there are that many diamonds there. But where was I? I was going to talk about those. Those two books are timeless. I remember what it was. Read stuff that's not about testing. Read lots of stuff that's not about testing, and live your life. Exercise your interests and your hobbies and your skills and so on, and relate them to testing.
Mm-hmm.
Relate them to the idea of how we know what we know. Read books on science. Read books on art. Read books on education and on how people learn stuff. Read books on here's an example. Okay. There's a book I got here. Where is it? I might have lent it to my stepson. The book is called Arrival City. That is not a rival city, but Arrival City. And it's a book about what its author, Doug Saunders, calls the last great migration. I mentioned that in the video that we were talking about before we went live.
Yeah.
It is a book about this great move which has been happening especially through the latter half of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st, from the country to the cities. And sometimes that happens within national borders, and sometimes it happens across them. But this is a book on systems. This is a book on sociocultural patterns, on how people solve problems, and how people become aware of problems related to this very large and very important kind of theme. What I found particularly wonderful about that book was its systems approach. It's a work of journalism. It's a work of data analysis. It's a work that identifies how little changes in one thing can amount to big changes in another. And there's some amazing stories about it. The author, Doug Saunders, has covered migration and immigration in lots of different cities around the world, and the different approaches that cities have taken to this shed lights on all kinds of stuff that we could consider when we're talking about testing and evaluating and observing complex, interactive, socio-technological systems, which is what we're engaged with when we're testing a software.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really, really good example of like thinking and learning something around testing or outside straight like the testing realm. And that was actually one question also, that what sort of conferences or meetups and interest areas should testers attend other than testing ones. So
yeah. I feel I used to do this. I don't do it so much anymore. I used to go to the local Perl developers group, which has lost a bit of its steam in the last 20 years. I remember taking my daughter when she was a year old. My wife had something on that night as well. And so my daughter's 18 now, so I'm sort of dating this to 17 years ago. But I went to developer meetups, and I really should do more of that. Product management meetups, because that's how I got to find out about stuff in developer land that was not related to the projects that I was working on at the time necessarily. Project management meetups is how I can represent testing in those places, and how I can find out about stuff that is important to them.
Yeah, you learn the lingo and how they like address things and how do they like work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Next one. Good morning. I would like I would love to get your opinion on this quote. So, I'm a tester that believes some developers can test their own code. I also believe that some developers suck at testing, can learn testing, and become better developers learning how to test. With that said, I also believe that some testers suck at testing, can learn testing, and become better testers and teachers learning how to test. So, what's your opinion on this?
Well, first of all,
you said that, but yeah.
Anybody can test, right? Anybody can swim too. Anybody can cook. The question is, how good a swimmer, how good a cook do you want to be? And how important is it to you? One of the things that makes it difficult for testers is that anybody can operate a program and find bugs in it, especially these days, right? And we stumble into bugs all the time. Therefore, management tends to believe, and other people tend to believe too, well, finding bugs is easy. I find bugs just by using software, so finding bugs is easy. Well, yes, certainly that's true of shallow bugs. Question is, can you find bugs skillfully? Can you find bugs deeply? And not everyone, first of all, is temperamentally disposed to do that. In fact, I would venture to say most people, especially in software development, are, as I said earlier, focused on success. Testers are focused on problems. So can you train your mind to take a problem-oriented focus? Anybody can test his or her own work. Everybody should test his or her own work. Seems to me, it would seem to me irresponsible for me to produce something for other people's consumption and not look at it, just sort of blast it out. If something is on the line, if something's important, if there is risk, though, I have to systematically mistrust my own capacity to find problems in my own work, because intrinsically, fundamentally, by default, I always have an insider's perspective with respect to it. I'm the person who made it. I know, in some sense, what I intend, how it's supposed to work, from my perspective. What I might not be so great at is knowing how other people intend to use this thing that I've built, what might threaten their sense of value, what they might find difficult, what they might find frustrating or annoying. And here's an example of that. Plays out every day. There are APIs in the world. And how are the APIs documented? Much of the time these days, they're documented by inline stuff, right? Stuff that is written in line with the code. And then we have something like Swagger that comes along and goes and sucks that up directly from the code. And there's the API. But that documentation reflects the builder's, the insider's perspective of that product. Not that that's unimportant, but what it misses out is what it's like for an outsider, what it's like for somebody who did not build that API. For that person, a whole bunch of things that would be helpful, current documentation, a focus on that documentation being there, helpful examples in lots of different languages for using that API, for using that interface, a critical evaluation of whether what is written in the inline comments matches up with the actual behavior of the code, whether there are additional or missing elements in the description of the thing versus the actuality of the thing. What I see a lot of the time is confirmatory testing of APIs, providing an API with some input, checking that the output we got is consistent with some anticipated, specified, presumably desirable result. What I don't see being done very often is an attempt by testers to do something with that API, to try to accomplish a task with it, to see what it's like for a builder outsider to encounter this thing and say, my God, the documentation is out of date, where it's not inconsistent, and where it's inconsistent, it's just wrong, or there's stuff missing. It's harder than I can imagine for me to build something with this API, or to connect with this API. That, it seems to me, gets missed a lot, to actually test the API from the outsider's perspective. Because, what's the API for? Well, it's for application programs. No, it's not. It's for application programmers who are going to be building stuff with it. So that's another example of the kind of thing that I try to put into my test strategy, to ask, how are people actually going to use this dang thing? And what quality criteria are important to them that might not be in sharp focus for the people who are building the product.
Yeah. Excellent insights. All right. I think we have one last question for this Ask Me Anything session. And it's how much you explain what testing is to folks outside of engineering, like sales, marketing, HR. It's sometimes they don't really have a clue what that is, what testing is. And
okay, so for people who are not involved in testing, what I try to do is I might try to make it as real as possible, as as close to their experience as I can. And I'll simply say, how there's software everywhere around you. And how software runs so many things around you. And your entertainment is delivered through software. Your TV needs a firmware update for the love of all that's holy. Software rules the world. And when people build stuff of any kind, there tend to be problems in it that are not necessarily easily perceptible to the builders, because they don't have your perspective on it. Their job, the builder's job, is to link the world of humans with the world of machinery and code. That's what software developers do. That's what builders do. That's what designers do, to link the world of humans and the world of machines. My job as a tester is to link the world of humans and the world of machines and the people who are doing all that stuff with the world of doubt. My job is to help those people recognize problems so that they can address them before it's too late. And that means that I do have a focus that is fundamentally different from the builder's focus. Their focus is on success. Their focus is on making your troubles go away. My focus is on finding trouble wherever I look, so that to the degree that they haven't made the troubles go away, or they've introduced new troubles, they're aware of those things so that they can address them before the software comes to you. Yeah. That's the easiest and most sort of complete summary I can think of that. And then I'll say that I do this by experimenting with the product, getting experience with it, exploring it in ways that the builders themselves don't necessarily have the time or the inclination to do, because they're busy focused on trying to solve problems. I'm busy trying to shine a light on such problems that are still there, or new problems that have been introduced.
Yeah. Great. I think our time starts to be up. And so first of all, thanks a lot, Michael. It was really great to chat with you and hear your opinions and thoughts on these questions. And I'm sure that the viewers have been enjoying this session. And once again, welcome to Finland in April. And we'll have the RST export course then, and we'll have the links to that below. And yeah.
Now, what are the dates now? It's in Helsinki.
Yeah, it's in Helsinki.
17th, 18th, and 19th of April.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, 17th to 19th of April in Helsinki.
So 3-day class, immersive experience. We will be testing, and we will be talking about testing. We'll be testing actual software, so bring your computers, because this isn't like certain other kinds of testing classes where you don't actually do any testing. Here we're going to be doing some testing and then shining a light on the testing that we've done.
Yeah, learning by doing and exploring.
And experimenting.
Experimenting, yes. All right. I guess this is it. And once again, thanks everyone, and thanks Michael, and we'll see you at latest in April.
Thank you, Yanni, and thank you to Tony, who's been at the controls in the background this whole time. And thanks to the folks at Hidden Trail for getting this set up. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. And good point. We have to thank our technical experts behind these streams.
Always.
I wouldn't have a clue how to do this, but it's been smooth. Yeah.
Thanks to all.
Yeah.